Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And I am so incredibly excited about today's episode because I have a woman that I have admired for a very long time. Her name is Laurel McHargue. She is an author, podcaster, public speaker, graduate of West Point, and graduated in the fourth class to graduate women. Served as a major in the U.S. Army for 9 years in active duty and another 3 years in the Army Reserves. She is also a retired English teacher who now lives, loves, laughs, writes, and podcasts in the beautiful Rocky Mountains. Laurel raised Khaki Campbell ducks for eggs and entertainment before writing about their adventures and sharing them on YouTube as the COVID Duck Chronicles. Obviously, the woman's got an incredible sense of humor. And if you are watching on YouTube, please show that again. You know, that does match your blouse.
It does.
If you are not watching on YouTube, please do pop over there after you listen to the recording and just check out that book. And I'm sure she's going to show us a lot more too. Okay, so Laurel is a multi-published award-winning author in a variety of different genres and continues to write and tell stories about life, both real and imagined. Laurel, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Cheryl, thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to see you again.
Oh, and it's an honor and a pleasure to see you too. And so the listeners know, Laurel and I did have a conversation a few weeks ago when I had the honor of being a guest on her fantastic podcast called The Alligator Preserves. And I don't know why I didn't include that in the bio.
That's okay. That was really fun too. It's fun to visit with other authors and podcast hosts and interview and be interviewed. It's just fun.
It is, and I call it pod swaps.
I like that.
Yeah, I think I made it up, so I need to share it and maybe, trademark it. I don't know.
Trademark it.
And what's especially fun, I think, is that, and somebody said it best when we had a Christmas party this past year, shortly after our Georgetown book event. That is the Book Nook. So we'll give you more information about that later, listeners. But one of them said at this Christmas party, as we were all milling around and talking and having a wonderful time, she said, "Isn't it wonderful to be able to talk to fellow authors without worrying about having to shove a book under their nose
Yes.
and to
Yes.
promote yourself?" So it's just such a treat to be able to get together under circumstances where we could just talk.
Yes. And there are so many talented authors in the world, particularly in Colorado, I have to say.
Well, I do believe that we are special, that we do have a very high concentration, let's put it to you that way, of authors in Colorado. And I think it's because it is such an incredibly rich and beautiful state.
It is. And I have had so much inspiration for my books for just living here and being
Obviously.
outside and
I
seeing
know.
things. And yeah.
So now you were originally from, was it Massachusetts?
Yes, Braintree, Massachusetts, home of
Mhm.
Sylvanus there and John Quincy Adams and a bunch of
Ooh,
famous people.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then how did you end up in Colorado?
Well, I resigned from the Army, didn't do the full 20, had to do a full 20 to actually retire, but my husband
Oh.
retired. He did 20 years. And
Mhm,
our last station was on the East Coast in the
mhm.
DC area. And he jumped into a civilian job and they sent him to Peterson Air Force Base, which is in Colorado Springs.
Oh,
And he called me from Colorado Springs. We had lived in Virginia for about 6 years. And he said, "It is gorgeous out here." He had never lived out here. And that night in my head, because we had moved so often, when you're in the military, you move every
mhm,
2, 3 years, sometimes
mhm.
even more frequently. And I
Oh,
always loved to move. So being in a place for 6 years, when he said, "It's really beautiful out here," I just thought, let's go. I mean, he in my head that night, I'm packing the house up. And the next morning when he called and said, I wouldn't make you leave your friends, I said, let's go. And we sold our house within a month and we moved to Colorado Springs. We were there for
wow.
4 years. kept going to Leadville to learn how to ski, and the kids were young, and they
Mhm.
snowboarding and skiing, and would stay at the hostel in Leadville.
Mm.
And I finally, after 4 years in Colorado Springs, I said, let's just move to Leadville, because how cool would it be to live in an old mining town? And so we lived in Leadville for 12 years.
Wow.
And then that got to be a bit much, having to shovel snow and throw it over my
Mm.
shoulder into the yard, um, for too many months. And so after 12 years in Leadville, we moved down here to Salida, which is just an hour south of Leadville, and that much lower elevation and
Mhm.
a little bit more
So
common.
I just wanted to, I have been very remiss because I have not, as of yet, thanked you for your service. So
Oh,
thank you
well,
for your service to our country. I appreciate that.
you're welcome. It was my pleasure. And honestly, those years were amazing for me.
Hmm.
They were life-changing, obviously.
Hmm. Apparently, yeah, that's where you met your husband,
Where I
Mike.
met Mike. I met Mike senior year at West Point. Good thing we didn't really meet earlier. I'm not sure I would have graduated. He might have.
Oh. Okay, so now I want to go back to Leadville because for those of you who are watching on YouTube, and if you're not, do go and check it out because Laurel's so entertaining. I see your author
Oh,
is Leadville Laurel.
yes, yes.
Leadville Laurel. And that was the one thing when I met you the first time, and it was like Leadville Laurel. And, of course, I'm very familiar with Leadville. I never lived there, but I have visited there many times and, have had a lot of, I don't want to say raucous good times, but really good times up in that little town. And as you said, it's an old mining town with incredibly rich history. And
Yes.
as you said, you got really tired of shoveling snow, and yeah, we all get tired of shoveling snow. But you were shoveling snow at an altitude of, is it 10,000 feet?
It's over 10,000 feet. They say 10,200 feet, 10,158. I don't know. It depends on where you are in Leadville, but yeah, it's over 10,000 feet. And it's difficult to breathe
Yes.
there. And I never quite got used to that. But I had my start with writing there after I stopped teaching,
Uh-huh.
when I gave up paid employment, as I tell people.
Yes, because you
um,
don't really get a steady
no.
paycheck as an author.
Right, right. No, but I needed to. I felt like it was time to write all the millions of
Hmm.
books in my head, and I started with my first novel, Miss. Oh, and this matches my shirt too.
My goodness, you were just so well coordinated today.
I started with Miss because my first year of teaching seventh grade English
Hmm.
in a school that closed after that year. I did not break the school, but it closed. It was a really rough year in a school that struggled. And I journaled every night I came home from school. I would do
Wow.
a bullet points list of everything that happened during the day, because I just really couldn't believe what I was experiencing there. It was a very, very challenging school. And I used to tell the kids, someday I'm going to write a book about you. And of course, they'd all say, oh, miss, can I be in it? They never learned my name, McHargue.
Uh-huh.
And so I named the book Miss, because that's all they ever called me. But that was the first novel that I felt compelled to write.
And
And
now, were you still in Massachusetts or Virginia?
no,
Where were you?
I was in Leadville.
Oh, you were in Leadville.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So Leadville Laurel, it's where I started writing my books. It's where I
Hmm.
got most of my inspiration
Hmm.
for my books.
Okay, so I guess that could be a plus of living at an altitude that high and having a little bit of oxygen deprivation is it
Deprivation.
might just, I mean, as a former respiratory therapist, I know all about that. And having a little bit of that low oxygen level might just kind of, get the brain going in different ways that you maybe hadn't before.
In very different ways, in
Hmm.
very different ways. And so, yes, and I've always been a very vivid dreamer ever since I was a little kid. I would come
Uh-huh.
down in the morning and have to tell everybody at breakfast, what I dreamt about, and they'd roll their eyes and kind of half listen. And I continue to this day to have
Hmm.
really vivid dreams. I was horseback riding before I woke up this morning. I was in a race and I was in the lead. And I'm not a horseback woman, but I was one with this horse, and it was remarkable. It was just wonderful. Anyway, I had some crazy dreams in Leadville,
Hmm.
and I shared a particular dream with a friend of mine, and she said, "Oh my gosh, you need to do something with that. You need to write a children's book," is what she said. And I wasn't ready to write a children's book, but I thought, oh, if I make what happened to me in my dream, a 14-year-old girl. And so that's how I started. I started the Water White series. Yeah, yeah, Water White,
I
book
read it. I
one.
just finished it a
Yep.
couple of days ago, and it was quite a ride. I have got to tell you that it was just an incredible ride, and, it was like you said, it's supposed to be typically maybe, young adult, YA, blah, 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 blah. But as you said, I think in the back of the book or wherever it was, it's actually for the ages of anybody starting from like between the ages of 8 and 108.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom enjoyed it, and again, it just was so much fun to write
Mhm.
because I
Mhm.
started with the idea of the dream, which was
Mhm.
me running away from bad guys and then having to fly across this big body of water, and a flying frog came out of nowhere and said, "Grab hold," and got me to the other side. And then there was a house, and there was a key, and there was a strange man who was like a wizard delivering something. So all those elements are in the book in different places. And as I started to write it, I would have more dreams. In one of my dreams, I walked into our home in Leadville, and there was this gorgeous multicolored swirling jaguar in the house. And I remembered petting it and thinking how soft it was. And then my dog alerted on the fact that this is a jaguar in the house. And I opened a door and kind of put him in the basement. We didn't have a basement, but anyway, that was my dream. And I thought, well, okay, I need to have a giant multicolored jaguar in the
Mhm.
story. And that's how
Mhm.
Thunder came about. And then one of my walks would walk up the east side of Leadville with my friend John Stewart. And we were coming back down, not the one on TV, not the famous
Okay.
one, but he's
Gotcha.
famous. He's famous in my world.
Okay.
He said, "Have you ever noticed the profile on Mount Massive, halfway down on Mount Massive?" And I hadn't. And so I stood, and about halfway down on Mount Massive, there is an outcropping of rock that looks like the profile of an old man with a long beard. And I
Oh.
looked at that and I thought, well, I need to have a mountain spirit in my
Mm.
book. And
Mhm.
so things like that happened while I was writing that first book. We
So
saw yeah,
oh, no, no, go ahead.
yeah, we saw an arrow in a tree, and he's like, "Do you have an archer in your book?" And I thought, oh, everybody's doing archers, right?
Mhm.
Hunger Games and all that. And,
Oh, yeah.
but then I thought, well, how do you make an archer different?
Mhm.
How would you do that? And so while I was hunting with my husband, the thought came to me, and I love haiku. The thought came to me, what if the archer had two heads? But then I thought, no, why not three? And it could speak in haiku only and kind of deliver messages. So I mean, that's how my brain works, with or without
Okay.
oxygen. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sticking with the oxygen might have or lack thereof, maybe a little tiny bit of a part in that. But the other thing, I just keep going back to the vivid dreams because I'm a very vivid dreamer as well. But when I got to the when I read the synopsis of the book and started with a dream, I'm thinking, man, I thought I had some pretty wild and crazy dreams, which makes me wonder. And just I have to ask, what do you eat before you go to bed at night?
That's funny. Well, actually, a lot of times I have popcorn. I
Oh,
love popcorn
uh-huh.
with tahine. I don't know if you're familiar with that spice.
Yeah.
Tajin, tahine. It's a lovely lime and pepper and salt, and
Mhm.
it's
Mm.
it's yummy. So yeah, popcorn. A lot of times I'll have popcorn before I go to bed.
Yeah, because there were times when I was having some of the most wild and crazy, and I mean, I come from a family, a tribe of bizarre dreamers. My sisters dream. Most of them dream very vividly. I have four of them, like you, and my mother always had very, very vivid dreams. And oh, we would remember them and we would share them, and laugh or cry or whatever was
Yeah.
appropriate. But this one time, I was going through this phase as an adult and having the most bizarre dreams. It's like I'd wake up in the morning and go, "What the heck was that all about?" And just replay it, and And it would happen every couple of days or maybe once a week or so, and then I finally had one of those mental head smacking moments. It was every single time I had pepperoni pizza in the evening.
Spicy.
Yes, indeed. So, and I'm wondering
Hmm,
if it's the same, effect as the
spice.
spice that you were talking about that you had on your popcorn.
Perhaps. Oh, now I have to experiment. We'll have to
And
alternate between something spicy and ice cream, which
so
is another
now,
thing I
since you
like to
are
have.
at a lower altitude as
Yeah,
well, then we can kind of eliminate the, oxygen deprivation.
right. Because I'm still dreaming vividly. Yeah.
Of course
Like I
you are.
said, the horses this morning. I've got to do something with horses. Well, there is kind of a crazy horse in the story, too.
In
Yeah.
your dream or in a book that you're writing?
Well, in the series, in the Waterway
Oh, in the
theories. So,
series.
what I also wanted to do was, there are so something has shattered the planet, releasing the stinking ooze, killing
Mhm,
things, and strange creatures and powers. And so I wanted the young people to start developing these different powers and abilities. And I thought, well, it would be fun to, names are sometimes important in a book.
mhm,
And I decided that I wanted a lot of the names in the book to be people I knew, young people I knew, my kids, other people's kids, kids
mhm.
I would meet somewhere. And so I would ask them, what superpower would you want if you could have any superpower? And they would tell me, and I would think, well, how could I use that in the book? So one of my sons, Jake, actually came up with the name Chimney, and I love the character Chimney.
Okay.
And it was just a dinner one evening. He's like, why don't people name, kids interesting, names like Chimney? Chimney's a really cool name. So Chimney, and I asked Jake, what would be your superpower? And he said he would want to be invisible, want to be able to kind of
Mm,
disappear. So
mhm,
that's what that character does. But
mhm.
one character, I was walking with my friend John again, and it was snowing out, and there was a family with a little boy. He was probably 5,
Mhm.
and he was shoveling too. He was helping his parents shoveling.
Mm.
And so I asked his parents, I'm like, can I talk to him? And they said yes. So I asked what his name was, and he said Bridger. Now I had never heard of a kid with the name Bridger, and I thought, oh, and I said, can I use his name in my book? Because I'm writing a book now. And they said, yeah. And I said, Bridger, what would your superpower be if you could have any superpower you wanted? And he stopped, and he was thinking, and his parents started chiming in. They're like, would you want to fly? And I'm like,
Yes,
I
yeah.
was giving him this, shut up, let him
Yeah.
come up with something, don't give him any ideas. And he said, I would build things. And that's
Wow.
how that character came into the book, and he is a pivotal character.
And he's quite the builder as
Yeah,
well. So
yeah.
I'm very impressed that the parents responded that way and didn't say, yes, crazy lady, you can talk to my son, but we're going to hover over here to hear what you guys are talking about.
I think they knew that I was safe, and I was with my friend John. So yeah.
Mm. So you were good. So now there's something else that just kept popping into my head as I was reading the book, and this, yeah, this is my imagination going crazy, okay, because I can do that. As I'm reading it, and all I could think of was, wow, some of this stuff might even be like events of today in modern time, modern day. The event happens, this happens. The kids are kind of trying to figure things out on their own, and the water and the ooze is starting to come. And I thought, this could happen tomorrow.
It could, with all the crazy things that are happening on our planet, right? I
Right?
mean, solar flares and aurora
Yeah.
borealis and interesting places and floods and yeah, the earth is irked. The earth is irked.
Yeah, and I love the way it was the event, and it was always kind of capitalized event, because
It
it was
was.
a big event.
Yeah.
And tell us about the star of the story, Celeste, aka Paloma. How did she come about? Where'd you find her? Did you find her in Leadville walking with her parents, or
Well, no, she was me in my
Oh,
dream. She was
oh,
that was me running away and flying and going over the water and wanting answers. It all that was my dream.
uh-huh.
And so I'm like, I can't have an old lady main character
Right.
for this book. So I took all those things from my dream and put it into the character of a young gal.
Mhm.
And the idea with the name was, you know, the names are powerful.
Mm.
And in this case, like the shapeshifter character
Ooh, yeah, she was pretty
who
scary. Ooh.
you get to know, yeah,
Mhm.
there was some kind of connection with, you know, if they heard the name, then, you know, they could find her. So she had to, you know, while she was on Mount Massive, of course, the
Mhm.
dove lands, and
Mhm.
Paloma is the Spanish word for dove. And I also
Mhm.
have a great niece named Paloma. So
Oh, oh boy.
I was able to work that in there.
How old is she?
She is now, well, gosh, I wrote this back in what, 2017? So she's maybe 12 now.
And she must be thrilled.
Maybe, maybe. But so that was fun. The
Mhm.
shapeshifter character was no one I knew, no one I met. But I knew
Mhm.
that there needed to be someone trying to stop her from saving the
Mhm.
planet. And,
Mhm.
you know, we had to
Of
figure
course.
out
Yeah.
her backstory as well. And that was fun.
Well, the thing I really, I didn't realize at first, of course, until I got to the end and I was reading the acknowledgments and yeah, at the back of the book was how much collaboration that you had with, so many different friends of yours who
Mhm,
would read
mhm.
what you wrote and, would
Yes.
contribute this idea.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so wonderful to be able to bounce ideas off of somebody that, would give you advice or tips or whatever. And how fun was that?
Yes, really fun. And a lot of times it would be at the hot springs.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, Cottonwood Hot Springs. We'd go there and would float around in the water. And, you know, one of my friends was the one who said, you know, there should be some kind of, you know, the water should have something to do with it, which is
Mhm.
how, you know, I thought of again the stinking water.
The
You know, so
stinky.
some of the hot springs have a
An
real odor
odor.
to them, a sulfurous
Mhm.
odor to them. Not the ones that I went to, but I thought, oh, that could work. So again, just getting different ideas from
Mhm.
where I lived and what I
Mhm.
experienced.
Well, the thing is, writing, especially when you're writing books, can be a very lonely experience.
Yeah.
And I like to say, hey, now I know, I understand why people who are authors, sometimes go crazy, because it's isolating and
Yeah.
it's difficult. And there are times when, you do have writer's block or it's like this is going nowhere. But to be able to have that kind of a support system and that
Mhm.
kind of a sounding board it's just great.
And right now, I'm in Central Colorado Writers
Mm,
Group. Used to be called Chaffey County Writers Exchange, but we
mhm,
opened it up to Central Colorado.
mhm,
And there is a critique group that meets the
mm,
first and third Wednesdays of every month. And oh my goodness, that has been incredibly helpful.
mhm.
Because again, you know, I've got a lot of books out there, and
You've got a
I
lot.
think I'm a pretty good writer. But holy mackerel, you submit a chapter or, you know, up to 3,000 words you can submit, and three different people will read it and critique it. And then you critique three other people's works. And the things that you can't edit your own work. I
No,
will
you
say
can't.
this to any author out there. You cannot edit your own work. You
Mhm,
know, you won't see little things like proofreading things, which are
mhm,
ridiculous. You won't be able to tell the difference between an of and an if or any of those things
mhm.
because you fill in, you know what you've
Right.
written. But as far as big things, like, oh, in this scene, how come this person wasn't affected when this person did this, but the other people were? And it's just like, you know, I
Mhm,
didn't even see that when I wrote it because
mhm,
I just knew that they weren't going to be.
mhm,
So a
mhm,
lot of times we know a lot more about what we're writing than we actually write. And so you get people, and it can't be your mother or your husband or your friends who tell you that it's great and that's
mhm,
all they're going to tell you. You need to have people who are
mhm.
wanting to help you make your work better.
Mhm.
And this critique group really does. It's been eye-opening.
So is this group online or is it in
Yep.
person?
We meet on Zoom. You have to be a
Mhm.
member of Central Colorado Writers
Mhm.
to join it. And yeah, it's like I said, the first and third Wednesday evening on Zoom. It's great.
Mhm.
Love it. So if there are any critique groups out there, if, you know, for other authors out there, get in there. You have to have
Mhm.
tough skin.
Of course.
You can, because, you know, if it's a good critique group, people are going to tell you things you might not want to hear.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
but if things are confusing to a reader, then they're going to probably be confusing to other readers too. So, and if,
Mhm.
or, you know, a lot of times it's like, I want more here. You went
Mhm.
through this too fast. I want,
Mhm.
you know, develop this. And so it's just invaluable
Mhm.
feedback.
So let's talk about some of your other books because I like you have written a lot of books and a lot of different genres, which impresses the heck out of me because I don't understand how, you can go from one genre to the next and you do all of them so well. I consider myself a nonfiction writer, and I had brunch recently with a mutual friend of ours, Jerry Fabianic, who's a great guy, wonderful
Mm-hmm.
author.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about, maybe I said I had this idea or this thought about maybe, writing a novella,
Mm-hmm.
and he grabbed that and what I said and ran with it. And then, so just from our conversation, he really got me thinking, but it's like, but you don't understand. I don't write fiction. And he says, but you don't understand. It's based on fact and what happened. So it was just a really incredible conversation. So going back to the conversation I had with him, the conversations I have with the other authors, like at the Book Nook, and what you just told us, me and the audience, the listeners, about your critique group,
Mm-hmm.
what advice would you give someone who is thinking about writing a book, but they've never written before, they want to get started? And before you answer that question, I had a delightful woman on my show just a few days ago who had written a book. And I said, so, what prompted you to write the book and blah, blah, blah. And she says, well, I knew I had to write a book, but she says, the funniest thing is I hate writing. And I'm like, but you did it. She
Yeah.
said, yes, I didn't enjoy it, but I am really happy with the results.
Well, I guess my advice would be the same advice you would give to someone who asked you how to eat an elephant, right? One
Mm,
bite at a time. Well, don't eat an elephant, first of all,
mhm,
but if you have to, it would be one bite at a time. You start with a sentence. You don't stress over writing the perfect first sentence of your book because you won't get that until you're way into your book.
mhm,
And you probably, after you write your first sentence, which will lead to a paragraph and will give you ideas, and all of a sudden things will start happening. You might decide that those whole first three chapters aren't the first three chapters,
mhm,
because that's how book creation happens. It happens over time. It is difficult, right?
mhm,
But don't think of it as, I have to write a novel. How can I write? How can I write a huge book?
mhm,
Uh, you just think of a scene, right? You
mhm,
don't have to write in order. You don't have to go
mhm,
chronologically. You get an idea, you work on that idea. And maybe that's a chapter that happens that will come in way later in your book.
mhm,
And by the time you get there, it'll probably change. But
mhm,
it's something that you got an inspiration for.
mhm,
So I would just say, don't think of it as having to write a book. Think of it
mhm,
as, what do you want to say? Um, it's all about making decisions, right?
mhm,
So you have you want to write a story, you have to make a decision on who's going to be the main character.
mm,
Who's going to be, are we going to have a sidekick? Are we going to have a bad guy? Are we going to have a villain? Um, do I want to tell this from a first person perspective? Do I want to tell this from an all-knowing perspective?
mhm,
So these are all decisions that you have to make.
mhm,
And sometimes you might get into something and realize that it's not working because maybe you're
Mhm.
telling it from the wrong person's perspective.
Mhm.
Maybe all of a sudden your sidekick becomes a more interesting character. So I guess my answer is there's no one way of doing it, and there's
Mhm.
no uh yeah, there are people out there who will tell you, how to write a book, and the whole save the cat writes a novel
Mhm.
has a great way of laying out the three acts of
Mhm.
a good novel.
Mhm.
And I've actually got a bulletin board with those things
Mhm.
laid out. This should happen here. This should happen here. This should happen in the middle part. This should happen in the end, as just kind of a rough outline. And
Mhm.
I'm working on that in the novel I'm currently working on, and it's very helpful.
Mhm.
Do you have to do that? I don't think you have to do anything. I met with a woman this morning who wrote a book, and she is looking to write something else, but is overwhelmed by the idea of writing another novel. And she said, I keep
Mm.
getting these sentences, these ideas. And I said, well, write a bunch of vignettes.
Mhm.
You know, you don't have to write a novel. If you have an idea that sparks something in your brain,
Mhm.
then it wants to be expressed somehow. It wants to be written. So go home today and start with that first sentence. Start with that, I am still a mother,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Give yourself 10 minutes to write. Where that goes, wherever it goes, it goes. And then end it. Maybe it turns into a short story. Maybe it turns into a novel.
Mhm.
Let your imagination take you places. Ah, let your
Some
muse talk to you.
Well, yeah, sometimes the muse talks back and a little bit of back talk. But I tell people that writing a book, to me, yeah, I'm a knitter. And well, yeah, I'm an off and on knitter. I'm a pretty good one. I used to be fantastic.
Knitter, warrior, queen, reluctant ninja.
Reluctant ninja, yeah, you name it. Yeah, and all of
You're
it's
it.
kind. I am. But anyway, I tell people a lot of times that writing a book is like knitting without a pattern. Because at least if you're knitting, you have the pattern in front of you and you have the steps that you can follow. Yeah, you're
Mhm.
going to screw up, you're going to make mistakes. Kind of rip it out and start again, or just rip out a few rows, but it's a process, and it's not an immediate, gratification. It takes a long time. But trying to find your own rhythm and finding your own voice when you're writing something, once you get there and it's like, aha, now my voice is coming through of what I want to say, either, to educate my readers or to entertain them. But it takes a while to find that rhythm. And don't quit. Don't give up on yourself.
Right. And it takes a while even to discover your characters. Some people
Mm,
will say you have to interview all your characters and you have to ask them a million questions that you know the answers to and that probably won't come out in the book, but you should know those things. I've never done that, but I have,
mhm,
as I've written the trilogy, the Water Eye trilogy. The characters have evolved, and
mhm,
there are times when it's just all of a sudden there's a surprise where someone will just say something and I'll think, well, where did that come from? I
mhm,
don't know. It's just the characters start to become themselves. Some people are planners, some people are pantsers, right?
mhm,
I'm Book one of Water White was totally pantsed as I dreamt, as I met new characters. Uh, it evolved. It continued. When you then decide that you don't want to leave your characters alone, and book two, all of a sudden everything's in Odin in book one. I need to have a water god in book two, and there's a tragic
mhm,
octopus situation going on
mhm.
because I was paddleboarding on Twin Lakes and I was
Oh,
hearing this rhythm in the water, and I was thinking there's something in the water. And that's where my octopus came into being. And there was a dragonfly that kept flying over the bow
mhm,
of my paddleboard, and I thought, well, I need to have a dragonfly in there. But how do you make a dragonfly different? Well, you
mhm,
make it enormous and
Mm-hmm.
fire breathing,
Mm-hmm.
a fire breathing dragonfly. And then of course, you have to have the end. So water white
Mm-hmm.
breathe is the culmination of kind of everything and what she finally decides to do. But I'm kind of a binge writer in a
Mm-hmm.
way. A lot of people say you have to get up at 4 in the morning, you have to write for
Oh.
2 hours, and you have to do. That's not me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've been pretty successful in my binge writing with
Mm-hmm.
producing things because when I get into a flow, I guess you'd
Mm-hmm.
call it, time disappears, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just keep on going. And sometimes I can't sleep because I'll
Mm-hmm.
go to bed at night thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to happen next. And then, sometimes my subconscious will work on things and I'll wake up and I'll be ready to do the next thing. And there could be weeks go by and I don't write anything.
Mm, that's interesting. Yeah, with my first book, I would just spontaneously, wake up like at 4 o'clock in the morning or maybe 3:30 and just be kind of tapping my foot and thinking, and it's like, oh, I'm already awake. So I would just get up and I would go to the computer and I would start writing, and I would get a lot done because that's when I was fresh. The dogs were still asleep. My husband was still asleep. There was
Yeah.
no television on. There was no radio. There was no nothing. It was dark outside, and it was a
Mm.
perfect kind of like a perfect setting for me to be able to just to write and
Yeah.
and it wasn't good, it wasn't perfect, but it was, the evolution of writing something like that, writing a book, it's just phenomenal. And I just want to take a moment to boom, 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 boom. Oh, and yeah, like, and the fact that yes, if you're paddleboarding on Twin Lakes, of course, there's the possibility and the probability of having an octopus underneath you. Yeah,
Freshwater octopus.
there you go. Yeah. So,
My coloring book.
where'd you get the idea for this?
Well, I love to color.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, the Water White series is for kids 8 to 108. And so, how would I get maybe younger kids involved with the story? And so I figured, let's do a coloring book that has the characters in it with a little bit of an idea of what's happening with the characters.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, again, it's another genre coloring book.
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
just like my haikus can amuse. I did this in 2016, which was a leap year, and I dropped my cell
Oh.
phone in the ocean, which
Oh,
you shouldn't do because cell
no.
phones don't respond well to that. I didn't have a phone. I was on the East Coast. I was on vacation. I didn't have a phone for about 3 weeks, and I
Oof.
thought, what am I going to do? Well, I love haiku. And it was something that when I was a teacher, the students, when we had to do a poetry unit, of course, they'd
Mm-hmm.
all moan and groan and, oh, poetry. And yeah, I taught them haiku, 17 syllables, right? A thing would be, this is worth 17 points because I want 17 good syllables, no
Mm-hmm.
ands or, lame
Mm-hmm.
words. And so I thought, oh, it might be fun to come up with first lines. So I just did 366 first lines of haiku, right? Like candle flame flickers, you know, walking on eggshells, the first line, 5 syllables. And then
Uh-huh.
I've got lines for you to finish the poem, and then a little bit of a place for you to, maybe write what your inspiration was for the
So,
poem.
Laurel,
So
was that a leap year?
it was a leap year. Yeah.
Of course it was.
Therefore,
366. Yeah.
366 haiku starters. Yeah.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah. You were talking about novellas, right? I
Mm-hmm.
did a 3-day novel contest with a friend of mine in Leadville. Basically, my husband went to visit his brother, and I stocked the house with all kinds of treats and drinks, and I had little workout stations around the house. And she came over to my house, and for 36 hours, the two of us worked in different rooms in my house on the story.
For how
And
many
I
hours?
through 72 hours, 3 days. It was a 3-day novel writing contest. And I ended up writing The Hare Raising Truth, which is a novella. And it, I, it was so much fun. And it was insane because we barely slept. And
Right.
the rule was we could only talk to one another if we happened to bump into one another in the kitchen. Other than that, we were, I set my alarm. I set my timer for like 50 minutes. So every 50 minutes, I would at least get up and stretch or take the dog on a
Hmm.
walk around the block or something. And yeah, I knocked out that novella, and which is very different from anything I've written.
Hmm.
But then again, I love short stories. So
Hmm.
my dark ebb grim tales.
Ooh.
This I started doing, trying to think of when I did my first short story. I did a short story a long time ago, and it was dark.
Hmm.
And most people who know me don't think of me as being like dark or
No,
negative or anything.
no.
But for some reason, when I write short things, oh boy, I've got a dark muse, and it comes out. So I do these contests.
Hmm.
Thing called
Hmm.
nycmidnight.com.
Hmm.
They have contests all year long. Everything
Wow.
from 100-word flash fiction up to short story length, 200 to 2,500 words. And so at midnight on a Friday night, New York time, so it's like 10 p.m. here, you would get a genre,
Hmm.
maybe a character, a word you have to use, or maybe a situation that you have to use, or a location. They give you three things that you have to include
Wow.
in whatever the length of the story is. And you have anywhere from 24 hours for like a really short one to a week for a short story to submit to them. And there's a small fee for
Hmm.
it, but you end up getting feedback from three different people. They
Wow.
really good feedback on this is what the judges liked,
Hmm.
this is what the judges thought could use improvement. And
Hmm.
then, they rank you, and
Hmm.
occasionally you move on to the next level. And I've made it through some of the different levels. And so a
Jeez.
lot of the stories in Dark Ebb are from those contests where
Okay, so I want you to hold up the book again because on the cover, that looks like a shuriken. Do you know what a
hmm,
shuriken is?
I don't.
It's a throwing star in
Oh,
martial
okay.
arts, and
All
it's,
right.
pointy ends, and
Yeah,
you
I'm
hold
familiar
it,
with
and I
throwing stars.
yes, and that's what they are. They're throwing stars. They're weapons. So,
All right, yeah, it's like a weapon with a planet in the center. I used 99designs.com, if you're familiar
okay.
with them,
Mm-mm.
for several of my book cover.
Wow.
Um, yeah, they're
So now
great.
tell us about I'm going to another book and another genre, because this is a book that I heard was absolutely hilarious, and that's Hunting for Red Meat.
Oh, Hunt for Red Meat love
Uh,
stories.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, Hunt for Red Meat love stories. Yeah, which of course, again, I love the oxymoron, in there.
That was basically a compilation of all the different blog posts I did from 3 years of hunting with my husband, never getting a
Oh.
kill, but being out in the wild with
Mm,
him and experiencing both the incredible beauty
mm-hmm.
of watching the sun come up and watching it disappear, and
Oh my God, did you
quietly,
stay overnight?
we never stayed overnight, but we
Oh,
would,
okay.
you go out as before the sun
Yeah.
rose, and then you can hunt until shortly
Okay.
after the sun goes down. So long days, and again, my husband's idea of fun is going straight up hills. He is a mountain goat. He's got mountain goat blood. I know he does. And that's
Okay.
not my idea of fun. So there's a lot of suffering involved,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
also fun. And just, when you're out there and you're moving very slowly and you're just aware of everything around you, your mind takes you places. And so again, with my phone, like I would whisper things because, you're not out there talking when you're
Mm-hmm.
hunting. So, but there was also in there, there's a story about my first time harvesting meat from an elk. It was a roadkill. So in
Oh,
Leadville, and I'm not sure if they do this in a lot of places, but the sheriff's department has a list of people who, if someone calls in a roadkill, they go down the list and they'll call somebody to go out and get the meat.
Practical.
right?
Hmm.
Because yeah, I mean, that's good stuff. And so it was October. It was an October morning, like 2 in the morning. We got a phone call when we lived in Leadville, and I was just thinking, oh boy, it's a search and rescue because my husband did search and rescue for about 12 years. And I thought, oh, he's got to go out and rescue someone. And I remember him saying, you want to go cut up some meat? And I'm like, what? What? You know, I had never done it before, but I had watched YouTube videos on how to do it so many times that it was in my head. I could visualize everything, how to do it. I knew how to do it. And we went out there at 2 in the morning on the side of the road near Twin Lakes, and this beautiful elk was just laying right there. And yeah, I we brought home some amazing stuff, and of course had a couple of vehicles slow down, see a woman with a knife at the side of the road, and then speed off. There were probably some phone calls, I don't know, but so
Oh,
that
I'm
story's in
sure.
there. It just
Hmm.
how beautiful it was. It was a beautiful experience.
Hmm.
And then of course there's a fishing story in there too, where the
Hmm.
fish that got me absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. So I had fun with that. Those
Hmm.
are, real life things. And then we were talking about Jerry Fabianic earlier, and I like doing essays. I love doing
Hmm.
essays about all kinds of things. And his
Hmm.
his Food for Thought series,
Hmm.
this is book two. And in his book two,
I love
um,
that cover.
yeah, I have 4 essays in here. One of
Hmm.
them is about my hair piece,
Uh-huh.
because when I interviewed you, my hair was down here,
Yeah.
and now it's here. And if you read my hair piece, you'll understand why.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
that's kind of fun. So I have fun writing essays too. So yeah, I mean, there's so much to think about and write and experience, and
Mhm.
that's why I do different genres. I don't want to be
Mm.
pigeonholed as one thing. I remember after
Mhm.
I wrote Miss, someone said, "Oh, so you're going to be the education, young
Ugh.
young person writer." And I'm like, No,
No.
no, no. I'm not going to label myself that. I'm going to write whatever my muse tells me I need to write."
Well, I have to go back to the elk because I remember another fellow author of ours, Alin, can't remember her last name right now.
Alan Riggs. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
Alan Riggs. And I remember the last time we were up in Georgetown together, and she was telling a story about, because she hunts and
Yeah.
she grew up hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole family would hunt together. And I guess this was probably a week before she and her husband got married. And she got an elk, and she was, I guess the proper word is dressing it
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, as she's
Mm-hmm.
cleaning it or doing whatever
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is. And, she's really getting into it and stuff. And her husband to be like walked in on the scene, and he just stopped and stared at her. And she just looked, and she had elk all the way up to her elbows. And she just looked at him and raised her hands and said, "What? What?" And I just looked at her
Bringing
and
home
I
the
said,
bacon.
and he married you anyway. And she says,
Yeah.
"Yeah, we still laugh about that."
Yeah, no, it's an amazing experience. By the way, I always did the gutless method. So if there are any people out there who are interested in harvesting meat from animals, look up the gutless method on YouTube, and it's amazing. It's
Okay,
very
good.
easy.
So a friend of mine who lives in Elizabeth, and we've been friends for over 20 years. She was actually a client of mine before, then of course we became close friends. And she offered, because she said that, her husband got his hands on an elk, and she says, "Would you
Mm.
like some?" And I says, "I don't think so, because I don't even know what I would do with it." And she says, "Well,
Oh,
apparently it's really good." And I says, "Have you had it before?" And she says, "No, this is my first time. And I thought that maybe we could figure out together what to do with it." And I said, "I tell you what, you go first."
oh, it is better than any
Really?
steak I've ever eaten. Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's not, deer meat can be gamey.
Hmm.
Um, every elk I've ever eaten, whether it's
Hmm.
from what I've had or friends who hunt as well, so good.
Hmm.
So, so good. Yeah.
Well,
Highly
maybe
recommend
some
it.
Maybe someday I'll try it, but I discovered recently that I think that an elk is my spirit animal.
Oh,
And
oh,
that
oh
happened through
dear.
a conversation with Jerry.
Oh, oh no, oh
And as we were
no.
having this conversation, I was telling him this story. He says, "You need to go, when you go home, you need to look up, what it represents, what the elk represents." And then when I did, it was like, "Oh, wow. No wonder
Oh,
why they keep appearing." So I don't know if I want to eat them.
well, I'm not sure what to say about that. I wonder what my spirit animal is. Wonder if it's that horse I was riding this morning before I
Could have
woke up.
been. But the elk actually, they keep coming to me physically, and and of course when you're in the mountains and you see the elk, you just love them, of course, but
Yeah,
they
they're beautiful.
actually come quite close to me,
Hmm.
not close enough that it's like, okay, we're a little worried here, but
Okay.
I've had and there is a certain buck, I'm sure it's not the same one, but will always come to where I'm staying, and
Okay.
come to the front door, and I don't
Well, that's
know.
pretty cool. Don't shoot it.
No. No. So, Laurel, what other things are you working on right now?
Right now, in addition to doing more of these little contests, I just did a
Mhm,
100-word one, which was fun. Um, I'm working on a novel. A lot of my friends have asked, when are you going to write about West Point? And I say, I don't want to write about West Point. It's already been done. There are other women
mhm,
out there who have written great books about it.
mhm,
And I don't want to go back. And so Linda Ditchkus, one of my author friends, said, well, why don't you set a military academy in the future? And I thought, oh, now that would be fun. That would be really fun. So I can use what I experienced, some of the things I learned, and put that on a character in the far future. um, 2345 actually, and there's an undersea metropolis with a military academy.
Okay,
And
so what I'm thinking here, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it is just like flashed in my brain and I can't get it out. Because, of course, when you went to West Point, I mean, it was male dominated, right?
yeah,
I mean, it was.
10% women, and our class had 1400 started, and there were
Mhm,
120 women in the 1400 men, and yeah, 956
mhm.
total graduated, and out of that 62 women graduated, so
So
about
wouldn't
half
it
the
be
women.
fun to kind of flip the numbers and have this futuristic, predominantly female warrior run and yeah.
I'm a little far into it right now
Oh.
to change that, but I have changed some of the characters, which is
Huh.
kind of interesting. Again, I had a meeting with another gal in our writing group, and I thought, I there's a doctor in
Mhm.
the story, and he was it was a male doctor, and so I met one of the servers at the restaurant where we were, and the woman's name is Vesper. And I thought, oh, again, names. Like,
Yeah.
that is a cool name. And during that breakfast meeting I had with my friend, I decided that the doctor was not going to be a male. It was going to be Dr. Vesper. It was going to be a
Mhm.
woman doctor. And so again, I had already developed this character. Now
Mhm.
I'm going back, and it changes things. It changes some of the dynamics
Mhm.
with the characters. And I think it's much richer for that
Mhm.
decision. So
Nice.
again, as you're writing, you might have a plan. You might
Mhm.
have characters that you think you know where they're going, and
Mhm.
don't be afraid to change if something comes to
Mhm.
you and you're like, oh, I think that might be more interesting.
Mhm. Awesome.
So
So
yeah,
now
that's what I'm working on.
let's go back. I know this is I don't want to say ancient history, but it's history now. The Khaki Campbell ducks. What got you interested in ducks?
Well, we have a couple acres here, and one of our dreams is to be self-sufficient, right?
Mm,
That's one of those things we all should think about doing if we can. And I grew up in a suburb in
mm,
Braintree,
mhm,
cracker white neighborhood. I didn't
mhm,
know where anything came from. I
mhm,
mean, yeah, the fact that I've even hunted is shocking. But we were thinking, eggs. We both like eggs. And my husband had heard that ducks are more cold hardy than chickens.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So I decided, okay, we'll get ducks. And I did a couple months worth of research and found this breed, Khaki Campbell breed that are supposed to be even, more cold hardy or whatever. And I said, okay, I'm ordering in the mail 5 females. They sent them to the post office and you pick them up in a little box. They sent them like day old in a
Oh,
box with a little heating thing and a little water. And I picked it up, this little peeping box at the post office, and I opened. The guy behind the counters was curious, and I'm like, "Do you want me to
I'm
open it?" And so
sure.
he opened it. You see these teeny little ducklings. They were so cute. Oh my gosh! So I had done all the research, had in our garage, a little heated area, had the big bucket and the heat lamp and all the good stuff. And because it takes a while for them to get some of their feathers, before you want
Right.
to put them outside. And so, meanwhile, my husband is out there building a fence around the yard
Mhm.
and building a thing for them to be in at night. And, it just a lot of manual labor
Mhm.
involved. And it takes about 5 months before you get your first egg. 5 months worth of feeding them, singing to them, sitting with, they're so darn cute. Oh my gosh. I would go out and sit in the grass and they would come and nibble at me and then like fall asleep around my lap. I
Oh.
mean, just really, really adorable. And you get that first egg and it's like a miracle. Oh my gosh, I was
Mhm.
so excited. And so I started doing little videos of them from picking them up at the post
Uh-huh.
office. Those are my COVID Duck Chronicles. I've got like 260 some odd videos of watching them grow, moving them outside, giving them their first bath in the sink. So much fun. Well, after the first meal of duck eggs, my husband didn't feel so great. And then like a week later, another meal didn't feel so great. And then the third week, scrambled eggs before a 6 mile hike.
Oh.
And it became very, very apparent that he's allergic to duck eggs, which
Oh.
is insane because the man can eat everything on the
Mhm.
planet.
He can eat roadkill.
Yeah, yes, can't eat duck eggs. So it became kind of ridiculous because I was, putting all this effort and time and money. I mean,
Yeah.
the eggs were not free. I'll tell you that. Those were not free eggs. But I ended up, trading them for regular eggs with neighbors because,
Mhm.
I could eat them, but yeah, he couldn't. So after coming up on year 2, I decided that they needed to go to a farm up the road. Actually, they were
Mhm.
looking for more ducks because they had ducks. So we donated them up the
Mhm.
road. But it was a fun experiment. It was really
Mhm.
lovely. I
And you
enjoyed
got
it.
a lot of great stories out of it.
Got a lot of great stories out of it. My first little children's book, which I illustrated myself, and
So is that where that came from? Is
yeah,
from the ducks? Yep, the
mhm,
quack.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. It
There's
was
there
fun.
there's a great picture on, just for the listeners, go to Laurel's website. It's got a great picture of her with her ducks. I mean, they look really big.
Yeah, they were good size ducks.
They
Yeah.
look like I didn't wasn't sure if it was the camera angle, but it was like these look more like geese than ducks.
Oh, they weren't that big, not that big, but
Okay.
yeah. I mean, their first flights. I mean, oh my gosh,
Their
my
first
goodness.
flights.
Yeah, yeah, it was fun. They take a lot of water though. If you're looking at chickens
Mhm.
versus ducks,
Mhm.
ducks require a lot of water.
Mhm.
So that was one thing. But they didn't require any heat at night.
Mhm.
So, there are
Mhm.
trade-offs. Do your
S-
research.
Yeah, no kidding. So
Hey,
now,
and if you've never eaten a duck egg before, I think you
yeah,
want to get ducks, eat a
try a
duck egg
duck
first. Make
egg
sure you can
before,
eat
yeah.
them.
God, what a disappointment.
I know. I know. Oh, it was fun.
Well, except for your husband.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so tell us about your podcast. When did you start it? What was the, event that triggered it, or did you wake up one morning and think, "Hey, I have nothing else on my plate. Podcasting sounds like fun."
There's always something on the plate, right? Well, it was another friend who had read spent some time on my website, which is
Mhm,
leadvillelaurel.com,
mhm,
and I would have my essays there with pictures and things. And she said, people don't really go to websites anymore. They're not going to like scroll through
mhm.
years and years and years of your stories.
Right.
They're just not going to do that. But you know, I've heard this thing called podcasting. So, plus, I had my book one of Water White narrated, and I paid someone to do that. She did a beautiful job narrating it.
Wow,
But then I
wow.
thought, I could narrate my own books. And so I talked to my husband about it, and he's like, let's get the equipment and give it a try.
Mhm,
So I started with basically narrating my own essays,
mm,
and then it evolved into
mhm,
into having guests and interviewing
mhm,
other authors,
mhm.
and that's kind of what I've been doing for a while now, and it's fun. And I do still plan to narrate my stories. That's a lot of work.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I narrated the first book, and it's not that big of a book. I think it's only 48,000 words. And, I had it professionally, we went to the recording studio and everything. And there was a gentleman who, was a contact person, and it was a sound studio. It was very professional. It was wonderful. And they're like, okay, so, we'll do it. It's going to take us 3 days. And I'm going, 3 days? We can whip this puppy out in one, maybe one and a half. Is, oh no, 3 days. We'll do, these 2 days in a row, take a day off, and then we'll do the third day. And I thought, I don't need a day off. Oh my God. I was so exhausted.
Yeah, having to get it right, and even though you've written it, sometimes reading it aloud.
Right. And
Yeah.
and I stood up, so we weren't, I wasn't sitting, and I'm in the sound proof booth all by myself in this room,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
guys are on the other side of the glass, and I was doing very well, and then I found a mistake. Instead of
Ah,
saying, like, hips, it was hip.
yeah.
And it was like, dag nabbit. And they're like, okay, cut.
And you
And I
got to go
said,
back and read
I
it. Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
believe it. Nobody picked this up, and they're looking at each other going, not that big of a deal, but it was
Right.
an experience. I'm glad I did it, but I won't do it again.
It is. It's a lot of work. Yeah. And I do my own editing of my
Oh, do you?
podcasts, and yeah.
Oh, oh, with the
It's
podcast, yeah. Oh, yeah,
yeah.
I do too.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't do the video because I tried that. I lost about a year of my life because I was bound and determined I was going to do it, and I had taken a course. I mean, it was just like a 6-week course from a local videographer, and my goodness, is that
No, I
work?
just, yeah, I don't edit my videos. So when I interview people, if you're going to be interviewed by me, get it right the first time.
Yeah,
I don't
or be
edit those.
okay with a mistake or two,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Well, Laurel, this has been an absolute delight. What final pearl of wisdom or pearls of wisdom would you
Oh.
like to leave with the listeners?
Well, my um, kind of what I live by is that, a life filled with challenge will never be boring. I mean,
Mm,
people who say they're bored, mm, I'm not sure how to respond, because
mhm,
life is short.
mhm,
The world is at our fingertips, right?
mhm,
We can talk to anybody. We can learn anything. You can learn how to the gutless method of getting meat off an elk if you need to when the apocalypse hits. I mean, you can learn everything. You could learn whatever you want. You can learn languages. I mean, there aren't
mhm,
enough hours in the days left to us. I would just say, don't be bored.
mhm,
Don't be bored. Do something. Take chances.
mhm,
Get out of your comfort zone. I mean, that's
mm,
that's part of the reason I joined the army, went to West Point, was because I was in a real comfort zone at Smith College
mhm,
for, a year and a half. And I'm like, ooh, this is not good. I'm not getting anywhere.
mm.
And I need a challenge. And and that's part of the reason I joined. I'm like, hmm.
Mhm.
So yeah, challenge yourself if you want to have an exciting life.
Well, you certainly have had and are continue to have an exciting life. And yeah, that's probably the best advice anybody could say is just get out of your comfort zone
Yeah.
because that's how we continue to grow and learn and stay healthy and vibrant. And I
It's
would
hard.
add,
It's
it is
hard.
hard.
But
It is hard.
so my husband will say there are different levels of fun. That just like, oh, type one fun is when you're really enjoying what you're doing when you're doing it. And then there's type two fun, which is you're not really enjoying it while you're doing it, but once you finish it, you're really
Mm.
glad you have done it. So I've done a lot of type two funs in my life.
I think that's
And
called delayed gratification.
delay, yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, Laurel, thanks again for being on the show. It's always a delight to talk to you.
Cheryl, we need to get together more often
I know we do.
because
I'm
we don't live
telling you.
that far away. And so let's do it. Let's get Jerry Fabianic. And again, he does fabulous essays too. I love
Hmm.
his essays.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, there are a lot of good writers out there. One other piece of advice: if you read a book
Hmm.
from someone and you like the book,
Hmm.
leave a little review on Amazon if you can. And it doesn't have to be a book report. It can
Hmm.
be it can be a few sentences, just
Yeah.
what you loved about it, because it makes a big difference to people like me, an indie author. I don't have a publisher. I publish myself, and
Hmm.
it helps to get the word out. Share, tell people what you like.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for being on the show and spending your time with us today.
Cheryl, my pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. This was a fun one. I told you it would be. Of course, every time, anytime I talk to Laurel, I have a wonderful time. I can just see her across the room and it's like, okay, my day is made. So don't be shy about getting out of your comfort zone and trying new things, and don't let anybody tell you, and do not tell yourself that you're too old to try something new, because you are
Right.
never too old. And I am bound and determined to create a society of people who are in their 60s and beyond, who are continuing to wow everybody with some of the things that we can achieve. So get out of your comfort zone and do not be afraid to eat roadkill. And
Amen,
that
sister.
and that is the way of the FemiNinja.